An exploration of some of the most catastrophic events in human history. From the first use of nuclear weapons in warfare to the worst nuclear accident in history, these disasters have left a lasting impact on our world. Our journey begins in 1945, with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These bombings, carried out by the United States during World War II, resulted in approximately 200,000 deaths and marked the beginning of the nuclear age. In August of 1945, the world witnessed a new and terrible form of warfare. The United States dropped atomic bombs on two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings were the culmination of a project known as the Manhattan Project, which was the top-secret effort to develop the atomic bomb during World War II. The bombings were also a strategic move by the US to bring an end to the war in the Pacific, which had been raging since 1941. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima, a city of about 350,000 people. The bomb exploded about 2,000 feet above the city and released the energy equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT. The immediate effects of the bombing were catastrophic. The blast wave and heat generated by the explosion destroyed most of the city, with estimates of 70,000 deaths by the end of the year. Many more were injured and suffered from radiation sickness in the following months and years. 3 days later, on August 9, the US dropped a second atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man, on the city of Nagasaki, which had a population of about 240,000. The bomb exploded about 1,800 feet above the city and released the energy equivalent of 21,000 tons of TNT. The impact of the Nagasaki bomb was similar to that of Hiroshima. The city was destroyed, with estimates of 40,000 deaths by the end of the year. Like in Hiroshima, many more were injured and suffered from radiation sickness in the following months and years. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked a turning point in human history. They were the first and only use of nuclear weapons in warfare, and their effects were devastating. The bombings also ushered in the nuclear age, which would be characterized by the development of more powerful and destructive nuclear weapons and the fear of their use in future conflicts. As the use of nuclear technology expanded, so did the risk of accidents and disasters. In 1957, a fire at the Windscale nuclear facility in England caused releases of radioactive materials, with estimates of the number of cancer deaths attributed to the disaster ranging from 0 to 240. In October of 1957, a fire broke out at the Windscale nuclear facility in England, which was then used for the production of plutonium for nuclear weapons. The fire caused a release of radioactive materials into the surrounding environment, and is considered one of the worst nuclear accidents in British history. The cause of the fire was a combination of factors, including the design of the reactor, human error, and poor safety practices. The reactor was designed with a graphite core, which was used to moderate the nuclear reactions. However, the graphite was also highly flammable and could ignite if exposed to high temperatures. On the day of the fire, workers at the facility were conducting maintenance on one of the reactors. During the process, a fuel rod was jammed, causing a buildup of heat and pressure. The workers attempted to cool the reactor by reducing the flow of coolant, which caused the temperature to rise even further. Eventually, the fuel caught fire, and the blaze quickly spread to the graphite core. The fire burned for 3 days, releasing a significant amount of radioactive materials into the surrounding environment. The release was not immediately detected, and it was not until several days later that the British government became aware of the extent of the contamination. The impact of the Windscale fire was significant. The immediate area around the plant was contaminated with radioactive materials, and milk from nearby farms was found to be contaminated with iodine-131, a radioactive isotope. The exact number of cancer deaths resulting from the disaster is uncertain, with estimates ranging from 0 to 240. The Windscale fire was a wake-up call for the nuclear industry in Britain, and led to significant changes in safety regulations and practices. The incident highlighted the need for better design and safety practices in nuclear facilities, and spurred the development of more advanced reactor designs that were less susceptible to accidents. Today, the site of the Windscale facility is known as Sellafield, and is still used for nuclear fuel reprocessing and waste storage. While the facility has seen significant improvements in safety and environmental management over the years, the legacy of the Windscale fire serves as a reminder of the potential dangers of nuclear power and the need for continued vigilance in its use. The Kyshtym disaster in 1961, caused by a nuclear waste storage tank explosion in the Soviet Union, resulted in a significant release of radioactive materials and contamination of a large area, with an unknown number of deaths. The Kyshtym disaster, also known as the Mayak disaster, occurred on September 29, 1957, in the Soviet Union. The incident was caused by the explosion of a nuclear waste storage tank at the Mayak nuclear complex, which was used for the production of nuclear weapons. The explosion released a significant amount of radioactive material into the surrounding environment, contaminating an area of about 20,000 square kilometers. The extent of the contamination was not made public until many years later, and the full impact of the disaster is still not fully understood. The cause of the explosion was a combination of factors, including poor design and safety practices at the Mayak complex. The tank in question was used to store highly radioactive waste from the production of plutonium, and had been filled to almost double its normal capacity. This, combined with a failure of the cooling system, caused the contents of the tank to heat up and explode. The immediate impact of the Kyshtym disaster was significant, with an estimated 8,000 people being exposed to high levels of radiation. However, the true impact of the disaster is difficult to measure, as the Soviet government initially covered up the incident and prevented any public discussion of its impact. It wasn't until the late 1980s that information about the disaster began to come to light, and even today, the full extent of the contamination and its impact on public health and the environment is still not fully understood. It's estimated that as many as 200 people may have died as a result of the disaster, and many others continue to suffer from radiation-related illnesses. The Kyshtym disaster is considered one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, and its impact on public perception of nuclear power and the need for better safety practices cannot be overstated. The disaster served as a wake-up call for the Soviet Union and the world at large, highlighting the need for better design and safety practices in the nuclear industry. It also served as a reminder of the potential dangers of nuclear waste, and the need for better management and storage of such materials. In 1979, a partial meltdown at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania, USA, caused a release of radioactive materials, but no direct fatalities. The accident increased public fear of nuclear power and led to stricter regulations in the industry. The 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster occurred on March 28, 1979, at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania, United States. The incident was caused by a combination of equipment malfunctions, design-related problems, and operator errors. The accident began when a cooling system pump failed, causing the reactor to overheat and leading to the partial meltdown of the nuclear fuel. This resulted in the release of a small amount of radioactive gases and radioactive coolant into the surrounding environment. The situation was exacerbated by a series of operator errors and design flaws, including a lack of proper instrumentation and confusion over the plant's emergency procedures. The operators attempted to correct the problem, but their actions only made things worse. As news of the incident spread, public concern and anxiety grew, and thousands of people evacuated the surrounding area. The incident was rated as a Level 5 event on the International Nuclear Event Scale, making it one of the worst nuclear power accidents in history, but it was not as severe as the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. Fortunately, there were no immediate deaths or injuries as a result of the 3 Mile Island accident, and long-term health effects were minimal. However, the incident had a significant impact on the public's perception of nuclear power, and it contributed to a slowing of nuclear power development in the United States. The incident prompted a number of regulatory changes, including increased government oversight of the nuclear power industry and improvements in emergency preparedness and response protocols. The 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster remains a prominent example of the need for vigilance and improved safety practices in the nuclear power industry. But the worst was yet to come. In 1986, the Chernobyl disaster in Ukraine caused a massive release of radioactive materials and widespread contamination, resulting in 31 immediate deaths and an estimated thousands of people suffering from radiation exposure. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union. The accident was caused by a combination of design flaws, operator errors, and a lack of safety protocols. During a routine test of one of the reactors, the operators made a series of errors, leading to a sudden power surge that caused a steam explosion and a subsequent fire. The reactor's graphite moderator caught fire, causing a massive release of radioactive particles into the atmosphere. The disaster had immediate and far-reaching consequences. The explosion and fire killed 2 workers at the plant, and 29 others died from acute radiation sickness in the following months. The surrounding area was contaminated with radioactive material, and a large number of people were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Soviet government ordered the evacuation of tens of thousands of people from the surrounding area, and the exclusion zone remains in place to this day. The disaster also had long-term environmental and health effects, including increased rates of cancer and birth defects in the surrounding population. The Chernobyl disaster is considered the worst nuclear accident in history, and was rated a Level 7 event on the International Nuclear Event Scale. It had a profound impact on public perception of nuclear power and the need for improved safety practices in the industry. The disaster led to major changes in the Soviet Union's nuclear industry, including improved safety measures and a greater emphasis on transparency and accountability. It also prompted a number of international agreements and protocols designed to prevent similar disasters from occurring in the future. Finally, in 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan was caused by a massive earthquake and subsequent tsunami, leading to 3 reactor meltdowns and releases of radioactive materials. While the death toll was relatively low, a large number of people were evacuated and remain displaced to this day. The Fukushima nuclear disaster occurred on March 11, 2011, when a massive earthquake and subsequent tsunami struck the east coast of Japan. The disaster took place at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which is operated by the Tokyo Electric Power Company. The earthquake and tsunami caused extensive damage to the power plant, leading to a series of equipment failures and nuclear reactor meltdowns. The disaster resulted in the release of radioactive material into the surrounding environment and the Pacific Ocean. The Japanese government evacuated more than 150,000 people from the area surrounding the power plant, and a large exclusion zone was established. The disaster had significant environmental, economic, and health impacts, with the long-term effects still being studied and debated. The Fukushima disaster is considered the second worst nuclear accident in history after the Chernobyl disaster. The incident prompted a global reassessment of the safety and regulation of nuclear power, and many countries made changes to their nuclear policies and safety protocols in response. The Japanese government and Tokyo Electric Power Company have taken steps to improve safety measures and to decommission the damaged reactors at the Fukushima plant. However, the incident has had a lasting impact on public opinion about nuclear power and its safety. Join us as we explore the stories behind these disasters, the impact they had on individuals and society, and the lessons we have learned in the decades since. This is the history of nuclear disasters.